Hello, I'm Kerry Bloedorn, the Director at Pioneer Park Historical Complex in Rhinelander, and an Oneida County Fair Committee member. Welcome back for another episode of Oneida County History. This program is brought to you by the Oneida County Virtual Fair and sponsored by the Hodag store in Rhinelander. We're in front of the historic engine roundhouse down in the old Sioux Line yards in Rhinelander. We'll be traveling all over the county today to talk about Oneida County's history with railroads. Come on.
Everywhere you look in Oneida County, you can find evidence of its history with railroads, often hiding in plain sight. Old rail grades running along the highways, trestles, and old lines turned into recreational trails. Many of the historic depots have been refurbished for use in post-railroad times. The Three Lakes Winery is a great example of an old Northwoods Railroad depot adapted for modern use. Part of this building used to be the Three Lakes Station on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad. Passengers disembarked for visits to the beautiful Northwoods or loaded up for the return home after getting their fill of nature in Oneida County. Before the modern convenience of automobile travel and quality roads to drive on, the railroads were the main means of long-distance travel. They also carried the mail and brought goods in and out of Oneida County, and so it was in the Northwoods for many decades. One could argue that Oneida County owes its modern existence to the railroads of the late 1800s. Prior to the development of Oneida County in 1887, it was a part of Lincoln County. As logging advanced north from the Wausau area in the 1850s, the primary means of transportation were the rivers. The Wisconsin, the Willow, the Tomahawk, and the Pelican were some of these major waterways. After the timber adjacent to these rivers was exhausted, a more efficient means of transporting timber, lumber, and goods was needed if Oneida County was to continue to grow. The many railroads operating toward the turn of the 20th century were constantly looking to build into the American frontier. It was the Milwaukee, Lakeshore, and Western Railroad that would proceed north from Milwaukee on its way to Ontonagon, Michigan, and would reach Monaco Junction, known today as just Monaco, in eastern Oneida County in about 1882. 5 years before Oneida County became a county proper. At that time, Monaco Junction was a part of Forest County and well positioned to become the Forest County seat. But it was not to be, as Monaco would become part of Oneida County in 1897. It was in this time period when the Browns from Stevens Point would approach the Milwaukee, Lakeshore, and Western Railroad about building a spur from Monaco Junction into their fledgling logging community then known as Pelican Rapids. They would give half their land holdings to the railroad and name their new city after the president of the railroad at the time, Frederick W. Rhinelander. I bet you can guess if a deal was struck. The Milwaukee, Lakeshore, and Western Railroad would later be bought out by the giant Chicago Northwestern Railway, also known simply as the Northwestern. Their line would eventually extend to Ashland on Lake Superior. It was this line that would run the famous Flambeau 400 and operate passenger service in the Northwoods for many years. It was the competing Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad, more commonly known as the Milwaukee Road, that would build into southwestern Oneida County from Wausau on its way to Minocqua. This rail line would eventually become the popular Bearskin Trail that is enjoyed by thousands of bicyclists and snowmobilers every year. The Milwaukee Roads Depot in Woodruff is now Anthony's Restaurant, and what's left of the Minocqua station acts as an information booth, and so in part lives on to this present day. The Milwaukee Road was also the line which features one of my favorite Oneida County Railroad stories. There are many confirmed derailments on the railroads that pass through Oneida County, but this one in particular sticks out among the rest.
We're just north of Harshaw, on what is now the Bearskin Recreational Trail. This was once the rail line used by the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad, and the famous Hiawatha train, which brought tourists from the Chicago area up to the Northwoods of Wisconsin on vacation for decades. It was at this site in about 1912, on the 750-foot-long Harshaw Trestle, that a train derailment occurred. The train and 3 of its cars went off the trestle into the swamp below and started to sink. 2 cranes were brought out to try to salvage the wreck, but one of the cranes also fell into the water. It is said that the train, the 3 cars, and the crane are still deep below the swamp surface to this very day.
Both the Northwestern and Milwaukee Road traversed Oneida County in more or less a north-south direction. It was the Minneapolis-St. Paul and Sault Ste. Marie Railroad, more commonly referred to as the Sioux Line, which crossed Oneida County in an east-west direction. The Sioux never had prominent passenger service like the Northwestern and Milwaukee Road did to the Northwoods, but it did carry a lot of freight in the decades of service through Oneida County. The Sioux Yard was located near the intersection of Phillips and Thayer Street in Rhinelander. The Sioux's golden-colored freight depot was moved from the Sioux Yard to Pioneer Park in 1991 and restored to become the Rhinelander Railroad Museum. Aside from the 3 56.5-inch standard gauge railways that operated through Oneida County, a narrow gauge railroad also operated in the county. First built as the Robbins Railroad and later used by the Thunder Lake Lumber Company on its 36-inch wide track. It hauled logs from the logging camps as far away as the Three Lakes area into the sawmills at Rhinelander. This little railroad operated from the 1890s to the late 1930s and was in fact the last common carrier to operate a narrow gauge line in the Midwest. One of its engines, the 5-spot, is on display at Pioneer Park Historical Complex. With the advent of over-the-road trucking, airlines, better highways, and a desire by Americans to own and use personal vehicles ultimately spelled the end of the golden age of railroads in Oneida County. The 3 main rail lines would end most of its service at various times between the 1950s and 70s. Oneida County's railroad history is evident today in the many old depots that still remain, but more than not have disappeared with the small communities they serviced along the way. Familiar sites like the Three Lakes Winery, the Minocqua Information Building, and the former Northwestern Depot-turned-office building in Rhinelander harken back to the glory days of railroads in Oneida County. The striking red Sioux caboose on Highway 47 just north of Rhinelander, as well as the overpass on Highway 51 near Hazelhurst, marking the gateway to T-Bird Country, are popular spots that let visitors and residents alike know they are in beautiful Oneida County. They stand as a testament to Oneida County's wonderful history with railroads. Only one rail line services Oneida County today. Canadian National operates on a part of the former Sioux tracks entering Oneida County from the west and stopping at the Rhinelander Paper Mill, the last vestiges of a once great era in Oneida County history. Oneida County's entire railroad history could fill many volumes with information. Alas, we only have time to scratch the surface during this short program. Much of the history is represented at the Rhinelander Railroad Museum at Pioneer Park Historical Complex, and I encourage you to visit if you'd like to learn more. This program was brought to you by the Oneida County Virtual Fair. I'm your host, Kerry Bloedorn, and I'll see you next time for some more Oneida County history.